70-year-old waits alone on Valentine's Day for hours, so waiter checks his pocket. The customers noticed something was terribly wrong when an hour passed and the old man was still alone. He'd booked a table for two, ordering some of the most exquisite steak and wine the restaurant was offering for that night. He even asked one of the servers to reserve a song for him and his date, asking them to ensure the night would be special. But as the minutes counted, it became clear that his date wasn't showing up. The woman who'd come for him would explain everything. Valentine's Day is usually a very special day for many across the world. It brings lovers closer and allows them to celebrate their relationships. For some, Valentine's Day reminds them of their sacrifices for their loved ones. For others, it reminds them they aren't alone in this world. But for some, Valentine's Day is a painful reminder of what they've lost. Sadly, the protagonist of this story falls into the last group. Albert Ross was a 70-year-old man living in Pasadena, California. A retired history professor at a local university, he'd given his all to live a happy life. But although he'd consistently achieved this in his younger years, times became more difficult the more he aged. Albert had always divided his life between work and his wife, Elsie. He'd met her more than 30 years back when he'd only been a junior lecturer at the university. Elsie had been pursuing a master's degree in art history from a different college, allowing them to meet at a related symposium where Albert had given a lecture. Their lives together would be the perfect thing he ever knew. Albert had never seen himself depending on anyone in his life. He'd made remarkable strides in each facet of his life independently, be it socially, financially, or academically. But with Elsie, he knew his life would be over the minute she walked out of it. Unfortunately, although the two would spend a long time together, that inevitable end would knock on their door. Albert had been in his early 60s when it happened. Although he can remember the cause of the quarrel that tore them apart, he fondly recalls the events of that night. Someone who's more than a friend and a lover should never leave you, Albert shared while telling his story to a customer who'd approached him. Elsie knew how much she meant to me and still walked away. He spoke of Elsie's smile and beautiful eyes as she struggled through tears to say goodbye, explaining the ache that struck his heart as he watched her leave. So why was he in a restaurant waiting on his beloved Elsie after nearly a decade of radio silence from her? The answer left everyone in the restaurant, including the staff, in tears. "We started talking a few months ago," Albert shared with a smile, cradling an old photo of his wife. He revealed that she'd reached out to him over the phone, regaling him with her adventures from their time apart. "She still has the same humor and wit, still makes me laugh," said Albert. Each word he uttered clearly showed that he still had feelings for Elsie. So why had she kept him waiting for so long? Albert had sat alone in the restaurant for more than an hour now. Several couples had come and gone, leaving him still seated as he patiently waited for the love of his life. But one concerned customer approached him to ask what the problem was. Why was he sitting alone on a night where he was supposed to be with his loved ones? Albert opened up, telling the customer about Elsie and how they'd broken up some time back. Over the last few months, they'd been conversating over the phone. He stood up, turning to the entire restaurant, which was now staring at him with interest. He told them how lucky they were to be with their loved ones, urging them always to love each other. He thanked them for their concern, explaining that his date was on her way. The person who'd show up at the restaurant door would leave him trembling. A middle-aged woman stood at the door, smiling at Albert. In her hand were her coat and purse, and she was dressed elegantly from head to toe. Without breaking eye contact, she walked to Albert and sat next to him. After exchanging a few hushed words, she got up and headed for the counter. What was happening? The customer who'd approached Albert earlier hurried to talk to the woman. Was she the same person he'd been waiting for through the night? She seemed younger than Elsie would have been. The customer introduced herself and explained what had happened. But the woman's response would leave her speechless. The woman explained that she was a doctor and Albert's niece. He was under her care. The truth about him and his Elsie was even more heartbreaking than the customer had thought. Albert's niece explained that Albert had severe Alzheimer's disease. He was constantly battling his mind, which sometimes convinced him his wife, who passed away a decade ago due to cancer, was still alive. This wasn't the first time he'd gone out to meet her for dinner. His niece had spent a better part of her evening looking for him. After covering his bill, she got ready to take him home. But the customer suggested something that would put a smile on her face. The customer called her husband to Albert's table and asked his niece to join them. They ordered more food and began a long night of laughter and memories. A few minutes into the dinner, more customers came by, asking if they could join in. By the 1-hour mark, nearly the whole restaurant sat with Albert, helping celebrate the extraordinary life he'd led with the love of his life.